How do you explain to your husband that you have been sleeping with his best friend for almost a year and still believe with your whole chest that you are the one who was wronged? Did anyone stop long enough to ask why I felt I had no choice? Or was everyone too busy picking sides before the story was even finished? I thought telling him first on our anniversary was a kind of honesty, but I did not know it would cost me every room I thought I owned. My name is Solène Varga, and I am 33 years old, and I have always known how to manage a room. I work as an events coordinator at the Meridian Hotel, which means I decide where people sit, how the light falls across a table at 7 in the evening, and which champagne arrives before the welcome speech. I am good at this. I am precise and prepared, and I almost always know how a night will end before it begins. I thought I knew how this one would end too. Our 5th anniversary reservation was at the Meridian Terrace rooftop bar, corner ledge table, which I had booked using my staff login. I had asked the evening bartender, Piotr, to have the gold foil champagne bottle ready. Felix, our 6-year-old, was at Marcus's parents' for the night. I had packed the cartoon pajamas he preferred and the small stuffed rabbit that lived on his pillow. I had done everything correctly, and then I had taken the metro up to the roof and arrived first, because I always preferred to be seated when Marcus walked in. He came through the rooftop access door 4 minutes early in the dark blue jacket I had given him 2 summers ago, and he found the right angle across the crowded terrace without bumping a single chair. And I looked at him and thought, this is a good man who does not excite me. We talked for 40 minutes about ordinary things: his bridge project, Felix's music phonics teacher, the February pharmaceutical conference I was still seating. The cold river wind came up off the water smelling of diesel and old rain, and the candle between us kept guttering and recovering. I refilled my glass twice, then a third time, and I felt the edge I had been standing near for months grow soft and then disappear. And so I told him. I told him I had been sleeping with his best friend, Dean, for 11 months. I said it had nothing to do with my feelings for him and everything to do with my feelings for myself. I said I had been feeling invisible in our shared life. I said Dean made me feel seen. Marcus set his champagne flute down parallel to the table edge. He asked how long, and I told him. He asked whether I was telling him because it was over or while it was still happening, and I said I believed in honesty. He asked me directly about the night in March when Felix had a fever, and I had told him I was stuck at a vendor event. He said he remembered the exact time he had texted me at midnight, and the time I had replied, 38 minutes later, and he was asking about that gap. I told him he was turning honesty into an interrogation. He said he was asking about one specific evening in March. My phone screen pulsed through its case against the dark tablecloth, 2 seconds of pale light. I reached for it before I decided to. He arranged our 2 champagne flutes side by side and said he needed time to think. In the apartment that night, he went to bed without argument. The anniversary card I had left on the kitchen counter was face down the next morning, its written side pressed against the surface, and I did not know when he had turned it over. The following morning was a Tuesday. Marcus made Felix's breakfast with his usual precision: 8 apple slices, 4 with peel, 4 without. He signed the river trip permission slip that had been sitting on the counter since Friday and tucked it into the front pocket of the school bag before 7:20. He did all of this while I made coffee, and he did not look at me in any way that could be described as pointed. He simply moved through the kitchen like someone completing a list of ordinary tasks. Then he called to Felix that shoes were next, knelt to help with the stiff buckle on the left one, and Carl's car appeared outside at 7 on the dot. I had slept badly. I kept telling myself I had done the right thing, the adult thing, and by the 4th repetition, I almost believed it. Watching Marcus steady Felix's foot, I thought this would be difficult but manageable, and that the hardest moment was already behind me. The belief held together in the grey November light, but only barely. I told Bettina before the first morning meeting. She stood at her desk with a double espresso and the conference layout glowing on her tablet. She had known about Dean for months and had accepted my explanations without much scrutiny. I told her I had said everything at the anniversary dinner and that Marcus had taken it well. I said I felt lighter. She said, "Sure, okay," and went to refill her espresso. That evening, after Felix was asleep, Marcus sat on the sofa with his hands open on his knees. He asked whether I had ever actually told him I was unhappy before I told Dean. I said communication in a marriage was complicated. He said he was only asking about one sentence. I didn't answer. He nodded once and said he would take that as a no. The Harborview Convention Centre Literacy Charity Gala was a Meridian co-sponsored event, which meant I had been involved in table assignments, place card design, and donor seating priority since October. I had confirmed Dean's table placement myself when he RSVP'd through his development company's corporate contact. I put him 2 tables from mine, which in the Harborview ballroom configuration meant approximately 4 meters of open floor and a clear line of sight across the centerpieces during the seated portion. I had thought this through and concluded it was plausible. The decision did not feel like an arrangement. It felt like management. Marcus had agreed without argument to attend the reception portion when I told him 2 weeks earlier that the gala was a work obligation. I had not told him Dean would be there. I told myself this was to avoid unnecessary tension before a professionally important evening. I had not considered what it would look like from his perspective when he walked into the ballroom and found Dean already working the room. Marcus arrived in the same dark blue jacket and found our table, introduced himself to the couple on the right, and located the bathrooms twice, which was his standard spatial inventory in a new large space. He found my brother Theo at the bar, and they talked for 6 minutes about the bridge project, which Theo's design firm was tangentially involved in. I watched this from across the cocktail floor with something that was not quite guilt. The way you feel about a neighborhood you have lived in long enough to stop seeing it clearly. Dean came through the crowd from the direction of the corporate tables during the cocktail hour and appeared beside me at exactly the moment when Marcus was 20 meters away discussing subcontractor specs with a colleague. Dean was good in rooms like this. He said the table placement was excellent, in a low, conspiratorial warmth that I felt in a precise location below my collarbone. I laughed, the short, genuine laugh. Bettina was at the bar 3 meters away with a glass of sparkling water arrested midway between the counter and her mouth. She put it back without drinking. A structural engineer named Reinhold, 3 glasses into a good evening and collaborating with Marcus's firm on 2 pedestrian bridge projects, stood during the informal section of the program and offered a spontaneous toast. He said something about the people who built the structures everyone else walked on without noticing, then found Marcus in the room with the warm accuracy of good champagne, and said that Marcus Varga was exactly that kind of person, and that his wife was a lucky woman. The table applauded. Marcus raised his glass with controlled good humour. He did not look at me. I felt Dean's eyes cross the room to find mine, a half-second exchange that lasted long enough to be read by anyone watching. Bettina's fork paused over her plate. After the dinner service, a drift of guests moved toward the tall windows overlooking the harbour. Dean came through the crowd and stood beside me near the glass, which was not quite planned and not quite accidental, because I had moved toward the windows and he had followed. There were 20 people in the same zone. None of them were Marcus. Dean said something accurate and low-voiced about the catering timing, and I laughed the genuine laugh for the second time that evening. A coordinator named Hannah, from a different hotel group, who followed me professionally on social media, took a photograph framing the harbour view and the assembled guests and posted it before the evening ended. In the photograph, Solène and Dean were close and laughing, with the body language of 2 people who shared something private inside a public room. Marcus fell into step beside me when I turned from the window. He used the low, controlled voice I had learned to recognise as distinct from his normal one, not louder, but more precisely aimed. He said he had watched me and Dean at the window and had seen a specific thing. I had laughed the genuine laugh, not the social one, at something Dean had said, in a space visible to most of the room, at a work event where Marcus was present. He said he was not asking what Dean had said, but what we had been talking about for 15 minutes. He said he was connecting the question to what I had told him 4 days ago on the rooftop, and he needed help understanding what being careful looked like from my side, because from his, it looked identical to 4 days ago in a different building. I told him we would talk about it later. He said okay. He did not reach for my arm or my back. He simply said okay and stepped back. And the distance between us for the rest of the evening was the functional distance of 2 colleagues. In the Harbourview parking garage, at 11:30, our footsteps echoed off bare concrete and cold exhaust, and he stopped near the car with the key in his hand. He said he had seen the notification at 10:52, a tagged photograph from the harbour window area, posted by a Hanake, showing us at a visible angle that any person in the room could have read. He held the key and kept the car locked. He asked one specific verifiable question. Had she placed Dean's table assignment deliberately, knowing he would be attending, without telling her husband beforehand? He said he was not asking about Dean's reason for being there, which was his board position and was legitimate. He was asking about the table proximity decision, which was hers. He said she was the one who had managed the seating, and had she arranged it so they could reach each other easily during the standing portions of the evening. The ventilation system hummed above us. I smelled cold concrete. He waited. I said the seating arrangement was my professional responsibility, and I had placed tables according to event logistics. He said I had not answered the question. I said the question was presumptuous and controlling. He said I had now used the word interrogated, or a similar term to describe 4 direct questions over 4 days. He said he would remember that. He unlocked the car. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th traffic signal, I told him he was being too sensitive. He said he would remember that too. He did not say anything else for the drive home. In the apartment hallway after midnight, Marcus stopped in front of the small mirror near the coat hooks. He opened his phone without looking at me, scrolled to something I could not see, and then plugged the phone into the hallway charger rather than the bedroom charger where it had lived for 5 years. He took his pillow to the spare room. I stood in the hallway and listened to the door close and understood, without yet accepting, that what had closed was not only a door. Sunday dinner at Carl and Ingrid's house smelled the way it always smelled. Pot roast, and the same herbs for 5 years, and the serving dish with the small chip in the rim that nobody had ever repaired. The temperature changed when I walked in. It was not hostile because the Vargas were not a hostile family, but it was different. Ingrid came from the kitchen and offered tea rather than the automatic embrace she had given every previous Sunday. Carl looked up from his newspaper, said my name in the way you acknowledge a presence rather than welcome one, and returned to the paper. Priya was at the table with her toddler in the portable high chair, and she smiled the professional smile, the careful one. Halfway through the roast, Priya asked, in a voice made more precise by its gentleness, about the weekend of Carl's birthday in September. She said she remembered clearly because she had driven 3 hours to be there and had been surprised when Marcus arrived with Felix alone. She said Marcus had told them there was a work emergency, and she had completely understood at the time. She said it was only that at a hotel association luncheon in late October, she had mentioned the emergency to Bettina, just in passing, and Bettina had looked confused and said the hotel had had no large events that weekend. She said she was sure it was a scheduling mix-up and asked whether the emergency had been at a different property. I said Bettina was probably misremembering the dates and there had been a vendor issue at a regional property. Priya said of course that made sense, in the tone of someone who has marked a box and moved to the next item. She picked up her fork and I watched her face for the next 10 minutes and found it unreadable. When plates were being cleared and Ingrid was bringing dessert and the toddler was stacking plastic cups on the rug, Carl set down his fork. He looked at me with the load-bearing wall expression that Marcus had inherited from the same source and said one thing. He had built his marriage on one principle, which was that you do not take more than you earn. He said it without anger or elaboration, without looking away first. Then he picked up his plate and carried it to the kitchen. I sat with my empty glass and felt the sentence land in a place I could not redirect. I covered what it produced there with resentment, because resentment was faster to access. When I left, Ingrid saw me to the door. She did not hug me goodbye. She said to drive carefully, and she meant it the way Ingrid always meant practical kindnesses, genuinely, and the care in her voice made the absent embrace more apparent rather than less. I drove to Theo's apartment. I needed one concrete thing from Theo, his confirmation, if it came up, that I had spent the first Saturday in November working at his place on a freelance project. I had spent that Saturday at Dean's. The date had come up in a quiet exchange with Marcus earlier in the week, and I needed one easy confirmation from my brother. Theo was in his kitchen corner with a mug in both hands, wearing an old university pullover, with the expression of someone who had been thinking about this moment for a while. I gave him the version, clean and simple. He said no. He said it without drama and set his mug on the counter. He said Marcus had helped him move twice and had loaned him money once without ever mentioning it again in any context, not as leverage, not as a favour owed. He said he was not going to lie for me to Marcus or to anyone Marcus might speak with. He said he was sorry. The word landed with the same weight it had when Priya had said it, and I drove home telling myself Theo had always been impossible under any kind of pressure. On Tuesday evening after Felix was in bed, I tried something different. The direct approach had not worked. The defensive approach had not worked. I sat across from Marcus at the kitchen table and proposed something practical. I said I was prepared to stop seeing Dean for the time being. I named a couples therapy practice, a real one, with its neighbourhood and approximate schedule. I used the word together 3 times in 4 sentences and kept my voice measured and forward-looking. Marcus listened to all of it with his hands flat on the kitchen table. When I finished, he asked one question. When I said for the time being, did I mean permanently? Or did I mean until the counselling made the marriage feel sufficiently improved for me to reassess my options? I said while they were working on things. He said the answer was temporarily. I said he was framing my offer as adversarial. He said he was asking for a definition of the word I had chosen. I said the conversation was over. He said he agreed. I believed the conversation had been managed. He had instead received a demonstrably provisional offer I had declined to improve when asked one direct question, and the exchange had clarified something significant about what I was actually offering. I would not understand this for several weeks. 2 mornings later, I came down for coffee and found the utilities binder on the counter near the recycling box. I picked it up out of a vague curiosity. It was heavier than I remembered. The dividers had been reorganised: home, car, bank, school, schedule, and a final tabbed section with a date range written in Marcus's handwriting. I put it back and stepped away. That afternoon, his laptop screen was active on his desk while he was in Felix's room doing reading practice. Before it went dark, I saw a cloud storage interface with a file tree showing a folder titled with the current month and year. I stood in front of the blank screen and heard Marcus and Felix reading together in the next room, Felix stumbling over a word and Marcus guiding him through it syllable by syllable. I went to the kitchen. I made tea. I told myself I had not seen anything meaningful. Marcus came out of Felix's room and asked in a neutral tone whether I needed something. I said no. He closed the laptop and brought it to the kitchen counter. For the past week, the laptop had been within arm's reach of him at all hours, and his phone was always charged, always the right way up when he was present, and always face down or closed when I was near. The utilities binder went back in the drawer. It did not fit as easily as it had the previous month. Bettina arrived at the co-working cafe before me on Tuesday morning, both hands around a flat white, looking at the table. I arrived with 2 things ready: the account of the failed fake compromise attempt and the plan for what came next. Over 30 minutes, I received the slowest, most careful withdrawal I had ever watched someone perform. She said, She said, I see. She said okay in the places where she used to say he's being unreasonable or you deserve to be happy. When I asked her directly what she thought, she said she thought I needed to be careful about what I was asking other people to carry for me. She said the situation had grown past the point where any one person's support was going to change its shape. She said there were other people with things to lose. I asked whether she had spoken to Marcus. She looked at the table surface and said yes, that it had been brief, and that she had told him the truth about two things because lying about them a third time was something she was not going to do. She said she was sorry. I sent her a text from the car saying I needed space. She read it and did not reply. Priya, who had already sent her last message of the week, did not reply to the one I sent that same afternoon. Marcus appeared on the events floor without warning the following day. He asked the desk to let me know he was in the lobby, and I came out to the corridor and found him standing with his work bag over one shoulder in what I was beginning to think of as his new configuration. Organized, present, not emotionally available in any way I could reach. He said he was nearby for a meeting and had a few minutes. He said he had been reviewing the joint account statement because he was preparing to separate their finances, and he had found a charge, a hotel name, Harborfield Suites, 2:14 in the afternoon on the last Saturday in November. His name was not on the booking. The hotel was not one they had ever used together. He asked for a factual explanation of the charge, the hotel name, the time, and whose card had been used for what purpose. I said he had been going through my finances. He said it was their joint account, and the charge appeared on a shared statement. I said he was being paranoid. He said he was asking about a hotel charge on a joint account from a hotel neither of them had ever visited. I said I was not going to do this in the corridor at my workplace. He said he would note that question as unanswered, alongside the question about the March evening and the question about the parking garage invitation, and that the pattern of unanswered questions was at this point its own kind of answer. He knocked once more. I came back out. He said he wanted to make one final clear offer, the last one he was going to make. He said he did not need performance or theatrical remorse. He needed a genuine answer to one simple question. Did she want the marriage to continue? Not on conditions, not temporarily, but genuinely. He said if the answer was yes, he was willing to have that conversation with full honesty on both sides. He said if she was not able to give a genuine answer, he would handle the situation properly, and the handling would be fair and specific, and he would make sure Felix was well through all of it. I told him he was threatening me. He said he was making a clear offer. I said I needed to get back to work. He said he understood and pushed open the stairwell door, and I heard his footsteps on the stairs go quiet. At the quarterly all-staff lunch that same afternoon, buffet service in the main meeting room with both the events team and front desk management present, someone mentioned having seen Marcus in the events lobby earlier. The mention was casual and benign. Someone asked whether everything was all right at home. I should have redirected. I had the social instinct to redirect. Instead, I said Marcus had been going through a difficult period with the concept of my having an independent professional and personal life. I said I had been honest with him about where I was and what I needed, and that he had responded with a pattern of what I called, pausing slightly for effect, surveillance. I kept my voice measured and slightly pained. Two people at the table leaned forward. I felt the room shift toward me in the way I knew how to create. Nadia was at the buffet station with a serving spoon of rice when I said the word surveillance. The spoon stopped. When she turned back to her seat, she put her plate on the counter and returned without the food. She did not look at me for the remainder of the lunch. The table had shifted toward me. Nadia had not. And Nadia had, as I would learn much later, already had a brief professional conversation with Marcus the previous week, limited to 2 or 3 factual questions about the events calendar and the date of my overheard locker room call. I left the lunch believing I had managed the room. I had given the room a version of Marcus that would stand in direct contrast to the person who would come through the lobby revolving door 2 weeks later, and the contrast would not help me. On Friday afternoon, Collecting Felix from aftercare, I passed the river promenade and saw Marcus on the bench near the third lamppost, his coat slightly open, hands loose in his lap, looking at the water with the finished quality of expression of someone who has completed a calculation and is waiting for the result. Felix saw him from the path and called out and waved with full-body 6-year-old enthusiasm. Marcus smiled and waved back, entirely present for the child. He did not look at me. I walked Felix home and made his dinner and told myself Marcus was clearing his head. That night on the kitchen counter there was a small silver key with no label and no ring. I almost asked. When I came down the following morning it was gone. On Sunday morning after breakfast, Marcus washed a mug at the sink, dried it, and set it in the rack. He said, without turning to face me, that he was going to handle things properly this week. He said properly the way he had said it in the events hallway, as though the word had a specific and completed meaning. He said Felix would not be affected in his daily schedule, and that the household routine would continue as normal. I asked what he meant by properly. He said he meant in the way that made the situation clear, fair, and documented. He called to Felix that it was time for shoes, and Felix ran in from the living room with one sock on, and Marcus sat down on the kitchen floor and helped with the second sock with patient, unhurried attention. They went out. I stood at the counter and told myself properly meant counselling. I poured the rest of my coffee down the sink. It was good coffee and I did not taste it. That evening, looking for Felix's spare raincoat in the hallway closet, I found the utilities binder on the shelf behind Marcus's work shirts. I opened it. The tabbed dividers included home, car, bank, school, schedule, and a final tab with a date range in Marcus's handwriting covering the past 11 months. I stood in the closet holding it and looked at the date range and understood, in the calm, arriving way that understanding comes when you have been keeping it out, exactly what 11 months covered. I put the binder back precisely the way I had found it. I stood in the closet for 60 seconds. I called Dean. He did not answer. The Meridian Hotel Tower lobby was the room I understood best in the world. I knew the exact angle of November afternoon light at 2 o'clock, how it came through the south-facing glass panels and struck the second pillar and made the marble look warmer than it was. I knew which panel of the revolving door swung clean on cold days. I had spent 3 years running events from the mezzanine above this atrium. I was at the events coordination desk on the mezzanine, mid-shift handover with Nadia, going through the pharmaceutical conference checklist, tablet in one hand and folded itinerary in the other, when I glanced down at the lobby out of professional habit and saw Marcus coming through the clean swing panel of the revolving door. The woman beside him was in her mid-40s, dark blazer, carrying a flat document envelope by the short handle with the relaxed confidence of someone who had carried similar envelopes into similar lobbies many times before. They walked through the atrium at a pace that was entirely unhurried and entirely purposeful. The front desk supervisor Cillian looked up from his screen, met Marcus's eyes, and nodded once. I came down the mezzanine stairs because staying on the platform was not something my body permitted. Marcus stopped 2 meters from me and did not block my path. The woman in the dark blazer said my full name, clearly and neutrally. She said she was serving me with a formal divorce petition filed that morning with the Family Law Division, including a motion for temporary orders regarding the family residence, joint financial accounts, and an access schedule for the minor child Felix Varga. She said the date for the first hearing was printed on the second page. She extended the envelope and waited. I took it with both hands the way you take something heavy when you are not expecting the weight. I opened it near the second pillar, where the afternoon light came through the south panel and made the first white page almost too bright. In the appendix, I found what I recognized immediately: a tagged social media photograph from the Harborview charity gala, time-stamped and archived, a hotel account charge at the Harborfield Suites matching the card record and date, a voice recording notation, an 11-month contact calendar compiled from location-enabled records. A corroborating statement from Bettina Kowalski. A professional incident observation from a Meridian Hotel staff member, dated and signed. I turned back to the declarations section and saw my name, and Marcus's name, and Felix's name, and the word temporary beside the financial orders and a hearing date 4 weeks from today. I turned to Cillian and said in a controlled undertone that this was a personal matter and would be handled privately and would not affect hotel operations. He said, of course, in the voice of someone who has decided not to participate. Nadia was at the mezzanine railing above me. I said toward the space between us that there had been a misunderstanding and she was sure it could be resolved through conversation. Nadia said nothing. The bellhop resumed moving luggage. The couple at the far counter returned to their check-in. The room did not take my side. It continued being a room, which was the most complete defeat I had ever experienced. Not hostility, just a lobby that was not interested in my version. Marcus said one thing from near the revolving door. He said the access schedule for Felix was the last item in the packet, that it was temporary pending the hearing, and that it was important she read it that day. Then he walked through the clean swing panel, and I watched him cross the exterior through the glass, and I did not call after him, and I did not move for 30 seconds. Sitting in the hotel room I had booked on my personal card that night, with the document packet on the bed and Felix's access schedule clipped to the 3rd page, I thought about the rooftop bar and the hairline fracture in the champagne flute I had held all evening without noticing, and I understood something I had not been willing to understand before. I had brought the confession to the anniversary dinner the way I brought event proposals to the boardroom. My version prepared, my framing in position, my exits located. I had believed that because I said it first, I controlled what it meant. I had believed the audience was mine to manage. Every calm question I had refused to answer had become a line in a document. Every time I called his concern insecurity and walked away from the table, I had handed him a documented refusal. Nadia's observation, Bettina's statement, the parking garage question, the March evening, the hotel charge I called paranoia. I had given him all of it. One refused answer at a time, in a lobby I had believed was mine, in front of people I had believed were my audience. They had been his witnesses. I had introduced them myself. The document packet sat on the bed of a room I had booked with my personal card, on a street I did not know well. Felix was on the even week schedule, which was Marcus's, and the odd week schedule, which was mine, and it was printed in a clean font with nothing in it to argue against because it was fair and specific, and I had not been the one to write it. Dean's parking space held a different car. The main group chat had not sent a message in 11 days. The staff at the Meridian coordinated with me on logistics and nothing else, and the pharmaceutical conference ran without incident, which was its own quiet humiliation. The work continued and did not need a different version of me to function. I had thought properly was the kind of word people said when they needed to feel powerful. It had been a description. The silver anniversary card with my handwritten note was not in the packet and was not on the kitchen counter, and I did not know where it was, and I did not ask. Some things are not worth asking about when the answer will change nothing that can still be changed.